Welcome back to the Group Practice Accelerator podcast, brought to you by Polaris Healthcare Partners, where we leverage decades of healthcare and business experience to drive growth in successful group practices just like yours. If you're a healthcare entrepreneur and you're interested in building, scaling, or exiting your group practice, you've found not only the industry's leading resource for business education, but a team of trusted advisors dedicated to helping you achieve and exceed your goals. In short, the team at Polaris creates clarity, confidence, and results. I'm your host, Jamie Falash, and the Group Practice Accelerator podcast is on the air. Hey everyone, thanks again for tuning in today for another episode. As I'm sure you recall, at the end of every episode, we ask our listeners to reach out if there are topics that they'd like us to talk about. And while we get a variety of responses, there are also some common themes. One of those themes is rooted in a big pain point that we discuss on the show from time to time, and that's retention, specifically incorporating equity as a solution to that pain point, as well as using this as part of a longer-term strategy for your business. Many owners come to us looking for help around offering equity, especially the when surrounding it. And there's just no short answer when you should implement an equity solution, because there's many reasons for doing so, as there are unique snowflakes, because no two practices or groups are alike, as we all know. And further, not two of them will have the same strategic plan or lifestyle in mind when they envision near or long-term goals and aspirations. So today, we're going to talk about some of the foundational pieces that you need to be thinking of before rolling out your equity plan. We'll look at your short game, your long game. You see what I did there coming off the Masters weekend? So you can walk away with a more clear picture of your future and how associates and equity and partnerships will play into the entire round. And who better to guide us along the course than my teammate and Polaris executive and partnership consultant, Mark Flock, who I'm slightly jealous of because I got to go to the Masters. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jamie, for having me. And yes, it was quite the trip last weekend.
Good. I couldn't resist a good golf analogy.
It was good. It was good. It was on point.
Oh, excellent. I saw a bit of that, and what a great show it was. All right. So we're going to get into some equity solutions today and talk about that when. But I know as business owners, we have to kind of dial back to point A on that timeline and start by asking ourselves, what am I looking to build and why? So if you could, start with doing a bit of a deep dive there. What do people need to be thinking about when they ask themselves that question?
Yeah, Jamie, that's a great question. That's a question I pretty much ask every doctor that reaches out to me to set up an equity solution for their team. You really need to understand that timeline, because that timeline, as well as how you're looking to exit, will kind of push you down a path that will lead you to what equity solution may make the most sense for both you and your associates, your soon to be partners that you plan on bringing on. So if that horizon is long, meaning 5 years plus is when I say maybe long, so maybe 5 to 15 years, an earn-in solution may make the most sense. Doesn't mean an earn-in solution is the best option. There's still a lot of more things to get into beyond what I'm looking to build and why, but that timeline is extremely crucial. Now, if your timeline is, hey, I'm looking to exit in the next 12 months, then things change. An earn-in model may not, most likely, unless we get super creative, which we can and have in the past, will not have enough time for that cake to bake for your associates to be meaningful enough for them if you're planning to exit in the next 12 months. So there's other solutions, there's other options that we talk to clients about and kind of go down those routes to help out associates that have been key providers for you, or you kind of want to provide some skin in the game for the effort they've given you up to this point, especially if they're top performers. It'll be crucial with that transition, especially if it's an external buyer, that those key performers are kind of along for the ride. So that timeline is important, but also what you're looking to build. You said what you're looking to build and why. So if you're looking to grow, exponentially, or maybe it's just adding a location every other year, or maybe expanding every other year, or de novo, whatever that may be. It could be one or two a year. It could be one every other year, maybe one every 3 years. As long as there's still a substantial amount of growth left in the business because of that timeline, then also, like I said, earn-in models make a whole lot of sense for both parties, both the current owner as well as the associates that are going to be soon to be partners if they're able to hit the benchmarks put in front of them to earn equity over time. At the same time, if you said, hey, I'm looking to maybe buy one more practice in the next 10 years and maybe exit in 12, buy-ins now kind of come into the consideration depending on what you still have left with respect to growth at your existing office, because there's not a huge upside that you're expecting over the next 12 years in that case. So it might make sense to allow a buy-in, but it also depends on what your strategy is. Are you looking to sell, maybe externally, to a third party buyer like a DSO or private equity company, or is it going to be to your associates? I have a lot of clients and doctors come to me saying, hey, and there's nothing wrong with this. I want nothing to do with the DSO strategy or private equity firm. I want to keep my legacy kind of in house, and I want to have my associates eventually take over. That's a different strategy, and we can plan accordingly for that. So, and it's building those stepping stones over the next 3 to 5 years to account for that, and that's the important part. But that pushes me and kind of like understanding that strategy is extremely important because that kind of pushes you, okay, these two things are most likely off the docket, and these two or three options are now on the docket. Doesn't mean we can't switch them back and forth. We do that all the time, depending on once we get through the financial model and once we get to planning out and projecting out the business. There's a lot of different factors that go into that, Jamie. But that vision and kind of that roadmap that you expect for maybe the next, let's call it 1 to 10 years, depending on your timeline, kind of dictates what makes the most sense for you and your team.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I touched on the intro and factoring that in with a couple of things that you just said, this can go so many different ways. And we have to kind of step back and look at that timeline before we can even start to answer that question. So thank you for taking that first question, because really looking at what you want to build, what's your reason, what does that look like for you is a good place to start. But let's look at, the early stage of that timeline. So my next question is, how would an associate play a role now, and how does that tie into your vision for your business and group? So meaning in the near term.
Yeah, great question. Depends on what you're looking to build and why. Kind of like you asked the first time on how that associate would play a role in. So, I mean, if you're just looking to kind of maintain status quo and just become more efficient, and you're kind of capped out, maybe that associate and they're wanting equity. Maybe a buy-in is a good structure to kind of just bring them on as a partner. And now you have some help. Maybe that allows you to scale back a little bit from the chair because they're taking over some of the administrative and business responsibilities. If you're looking to kind of scale up and grow, which a lot of our clients are, not all of our clients, but a lot of our clients are looking to scale, then the associates today are an important part of what your business looks like tomorrow and 5 years from now. If you constantly have a revolving door of associates, then you're not able to get to where you want to be or need to be in 5 years. You're constantly chasing your tail, replacing someone, getting them up to speed in a 4 month period, hopefully 3 to 4 month period, and then they leave 12 to 16 months later. You start back over again. It's just it's really tough to grow if you're constantly able to do that. However, if you can bring in that associate, and let's just say they're a GP and they're able to do $800,000 in collections or something in year one, they're able to do 1 million in year two, 1,200,000 in year three, and so forth, see some growth. Now you can go hire someone else and do the exact same thing over again. You're scaling up just with your producers, your providers that you have in your practice. So you can go buy that next practice. You can go start up that next de novo and do those things because you now have people that can take care of your flagship office or offices to go do the next. So they do play a key role, and equity can be a motivator for a lot of those associates. It's not necessarily a end all be all for all associates though. Some associates just want to show up, clock in, clock out, and receive their paycheck. They don't want added responsibilities. Equity is not important to them, just to be clear. However, most high performing associates do want a piece of the pie or skin in the game, and they want to be partners. That's kind of what a lot of them go through dental school to eventually see themselves being partners. Now, a lot of them are more open to working for group practices today than they were 5 to 10 years ago. A lot of them want to be their own practice owners, solo practice owners. that is slowing down with respect to doctors coming out and seeing the viability of being a practice owner on their own. It's extremely difficult with all these group practices, with them having economies of scale from a buying power perspective, and just being able to recruit and retain talent with what they can provide versus a solo doctor could not. So, and it's just a lot more at bats from a clinical perspective as well to increase their W-2 or 1099 income, depending on how they're paid. So they're a huge role in your growth strategy, and you need to ask questions now with respect to what your associates are expecting and wanting, if you haven't already, because they may be thinking one thing and you're assuming something else. When you're assuming it and those things do not align, that's usually when you lose someone. So it's having that communication up front with what that expectation is and setting a plan ahead. Whether it be, in 2 years, I want to be able to make you a partner. Do not, promise dollar amounts or percentages because you don't want to put yourself in a corner, but you're open to that conversation. You want to create a model for them or create a solution for them. And that's where we come into play. Connect with us, a year out so we can model that out, present it to them, make them excited, get everything going. If not, create it as they're coming in so you already have the strategy in place. Yeah.
Yeah, and that really all plays into having a solid recruitment plan and always be thinking about your next move. As part of your strategic plan, you need to know when you want to have associates come into that picture, whether that's early on or a bit later, like you said, on the timeline, but being able to offer equity and really what that looks like, and then finding out what your prospective associate wants. Maybe they don't want ownership, although I will say that is very rare. Most docs come out of school and they do want to own their own practice. They do want to have their own group. They're all about ownership, but there are some barriers to that, as we know, with debt coming out of school. So sometimes an earn-in model makes perfect sense. But let's maybe look at the other end of the timeline. Like, how does an associate play a role into your exit strategy? What do I need to be thinking about with that? And what does that time frame look like? So maybe we can talk about, the 6 to 12 month exit strategy versus 3 to 5 years versus 10 years out. Can you kind of segment that out for us and how the associate plays a role in each of those categories?
Yeah, that's a very heady question, Jamie, on there because once again, it kind of goes back to depending on your exit strategy.
Sure.
If you're looking to, I would say, sell externally, meaning to a third party buyer, whether it be a strategic DSO or private equity firm, the associates play or can play a very key role in that transition. If you think about it, if you have 10 associates, you might be still as an owner, still working clinically, maybe at that point only 1 or 2 days a week, if at all in some cases, but you're only 1/11th or 1/12th maybe of the overall production or revenue in that particular in your business. So those associates and retaining them for that transition is extremely important. So you want to account for that in advance. If they're partners in a business, then that should or could be a very smooth transition because now you'll have the partnership agreement or operating agreement, which kind of binds everyone together. And there's drag along, tag along clauses that can be a benefit or a pull to bring them into the sale. And that buyer is also going to want your at least mainly your key providers, which are an integral part of the exit strategy for you, is that they need to be retained because if they're, like, to say you have a $2 million producer and everyone else is at $1 million, that $2 million producer is doing double than everyone else. That person needs to be retained, otherwise the revenues drop $2 million. That's more
Exactly.
risky for that buyer if you lose $2 million in production, let alone half of the associates, do not transition. So employment contracts are key. Are they transferable? Equity is a great key or pull for all of that for those associates, whether that's, and it doesn't have to be, they don't have to necessarily be 20% owners. They can be a 3% owner and maybe holding $1 million in equity. And that's an incentive enough for, them to come along and work with you for the next stage of your career. Because it's really the next stage. It's not necessarily a negative thing when you transition to a buyer. It could be a very positive thing for those associates and minority partners. It may not feel that way initially, but afterwards there's probably so many things that that DSO or private equity firm can offer and do that you may not even be able to offer as a small to mid-sized group. So it's not just a negative thing. It's very positive in a lot of cases as well. So, but you want them to be able to participate and have an economic outcome because of that, because they're also key in that strategy. Now, if you're selling internally, and how does that time frame kind of play? You should not wait until you're ready to exit to talk to your associate about buying your business. That is like the Achilles heel, or probably it's gonna be the downfall, because you're probably going to end up working for another 5 years to find someone else if that person's not interested in buying your business. And it's not even about not interested in buying the business. Can they afford your business is the other question. So they may want it, but the bank will not provide them financing. So if
Yeah.
you want to sell internally, kind of like I mentioned earlier, like the internal sale, maybe having a strategy, years in advance, and maybe they buy in. I've done this many times with clients that are just want to sell to internal team. They might have two associates today. They're looking to get to maybe four. Bring in one or two of those associates as minority partners today. Already have them on board. Thinking about it from a banking perspective, if you have two or three associates that are going to buy you out when you're ready to exit, and maybe say you hold 70% and they each hold 10% each, it's much easier for that bank when the buyers or their client that's going to be lending the loan, taking on all the risk, are already partners in the business. They already know the business inside and out. They already have equity in the business. They're producing in the business, and we're only going to have to finance 70% of the overall business versus 100%, which might be a higher percentage. So there's a lot of benefits there to kind of get ahead of that. Plus, you have these associates kind of locked in, not forced to buy your practice, but there's already skin in the game for them. So why wouldn't they want to take the step to the next level if they're excited and see being a full owners in the business? That's just one example. It might just be one doctor, that you allow to buy in for maybe 20% up front. And that's kind of like your stepping stone. But I've seen so many times, Jamie, where they wait until maybe a year out from when they're looking to exit. They talk to the associate. They say, "Yeah, I'm interested." They can't get financing because you've built a big business. At that point, they can't get financing by themselves. Or they say, "Yeah, I'm not really interested in taking on that type of risk. I don't want to I don't want to be a full owner at this point in time. I'm kind of scared about that." They didn't really plan ahead. Now they're having to start the wheels again, maybe bring on a broker or hire Polaris from a sell side advisory perspective to look externally. And that wasn't their plan initially. And that may come with a work back period. And that might be structured differently. So you biggest thing I can recommend here is be proactive. And I'm not talking proactive 6 months out. I'm talking proactive, come speak to us or someone 5 years out at least, and
Yeah.
start talking about what that looks like. So we can help you plan accordingly and work backwards with your vision and create a strategy on what makes the most sense on how to exit with respect to partnership.
It's critical, as we know, to think about your exit time frame when you're considering a partnership solution. But let's talk about using those types of solutions as a defensive strategy. Can you define that for listeners? We hear a lot of that in the market. So, can you define what you mean by defensive strategy? You and I have talked about this before, but I want to clear it up for listeners. And can an equity model for your team create that?
Yeah, so I mean, defensive strategy, I guess it kind of depends on how you're relating that to, I guess, competition. Yeah, so I mean, great question. Obviously, the bigger you grow or the more profitable you are, and the more ways you can have a defensive strategy against the larger DSOs out there. So if let's just say you have 5 locations and you're doing maybe $10 million in revenue, well, you have capabilities that a single location doing $2 million does not have. And you have access to multiple associates that are working for you that can kind of fill in the gaps if there's PTO or vacations taken. You can attract associates with a larger business. We're not talking, an 1,800 location, maybe like Heartland, but we're just talking, $10 million in revenue and growing. Well, associates will want the opportunity to do more. They don't want to just show up and produce 800,000, like I mentioned as an example earlier. They want to, be able to come in and say, "Hey, I can confidently do 800,000 the first year, but I want to be able to have that ability to do a million, 1,200,000 the next year. I want to grow." And with a growing group, you have the ability to do that. So by means of defensive with partnerships and associates, you're creating that opportunity for them, which should excite them if they're motivated with respect to that. In addition, if you're adding associates and you're retaining associates, you're able to grow, which indirectly creates a more defensible strategy versus just maintaining status quo where you are today. So it doesn't mean that by incorporating partnerships that you have to grow. It's just you're creating a defensible strategy when you're adding associates and you're getting more out of the associates, where they're clinically performing better, providing better patient experience. You're finding efficiencies with things done, or they're able to bring in new capabilities with different procedures that they're able to do that you don't offer today. There's a lot of different things that you can do when you're growing and expanding with these associates and partners, and keeping more things in house and growing forward. So I don't know if that kind of helps to answer the question, Jamie, with respect to answering like partnerships and defensive strategy, but it is very defensive if you're including partners because they're bought into the business and helping to grow the business, which is key, versus just associates that are showing up and clocking in, clocking out.
Yeah, that's spot on, Mark. Thank you. And thinking about it from a recruitment perspective, there's a ton of competition out there. We've got every other group is looking for doctors, probably every group, not even every other, but positioning yourself in such a way that you're offering the right equity solution to the right associate that fits your culture, fits your timeline, fits your strategy, a critical piece to have in place, and just makes you more attractive in terms of what they want for their life plan. And then again, you've created potentially an internal buyer there as well. Getting back
Yeah,
to sort of, oh, go ahead.
yeah, Jimmy, to that point, I just want to add. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's harder to find associates out there, but the good associates, and this isn't always the case. There's always different situations that may or may not happen, but I feel just people in general, they're always casually looking if they're an associate. Business owners are not, but actually business owners are. They're always casually looking for the next opportunity. So it's no different with associates, whether that be like a new location for de novo or maybe a new location to purchase. They're always casually looking and interested in talking to, sellers about that, or people looking to retire eventually to take over their business. Associates are no different. So you need to be proactive in that search. So if you think you're going to need someone a year from now, you should be looking to talk to people now, not waiting 9 months from now or a year from now when the need occurs. You need to be just on the side, just proactively recruiting for associates that, to your point, Jamie, fit your culture, fit your vision, may want ownership. If you have a pathway for partnership that's already, Polaris already helped you create one, you can use that to find those A and B associates out there that may already be employed at a business that might be one or two locations that does not offer that. So if you have these things that they're interested in that are not being currently offered where they're at, today, then these are things that could eventually pull these people over that will help you grow. So when you do, start up that new office, you have someone to plug and play. Someone that's interested, you spoke to maybe a year ago, 6 months ago, you touch base with them every quarter just to check in and kind of give them an update. Hey, we're expanding, we're growing. I think we might need you maybe in 3 to 4 months. Are you still interested? To maybe one or two associates, and they're excited. They already know everything about you. And then it's just a phone call. They're waiting to be called up to the big leagues, is probably the best way to put it. And they're in the minor leagues right now with respect to baseball reference. I mean, it's just that's how that should happen. And that's once again allowing you to grow quicker and more efficiently versus constantly reacting. If you're constantly reacting, and this is just outside of partnerships, if you're constantly reacting, you're actually probably going backwards more times than not. And people don't always realize that when you're proactive, things are smoother. You have a clear headspace. You're not constantly stressing out as much, and you're always 2 steps ahead of your competition.
Absolutely. And that's really a smart play. We talk about that quite a bit on this show, and you and I have discussed the preparation and always be looking for a great associate, because you better believe if there's an associate that isn't locked in somewhere and happy and growing, they're looking. So you better be looking as well.
Correct.
You have that right fit and the right solution to keep them. Like we said, there's a lot of competition, and you made a good point there. We also talk about being proactive as versus reactive, and that plays into the whole strategy. You have to be ready. You have to be talking to people, going to meetings, going to shows, and keeping people in your pipeline. So critical piece. Otherwise, you're reacting to a situation that's going to cost your business money at the end of the day.
Yep. So thank you, Jamie, for having me on the podcast. One thing I just want to leave everyone with is we talked a lot about what you're looking to build and why. I just want to leave you all with one question. Like, do you have a plan at this point in time? And if you don't have a plan, why not? If you're struggling to come up with that plan, feel free to give us a call. We can kind of talk through what things personally that you're looking to achieve by the end of your career, and then kind of what that may look like over the next 12 months, 5 years, 10 years, whatever that may be, to make sure you're on the right path for success. And I think that's going to be key. And once again, this is being proactive versus reactive, which has kind of been the theme throughout this episode, Jamie. So that's the only thing I want to leave everyone with at this point in time.
Good. Great question. Something good to be thinking about after you listen to this show. Well, Mark, we always appreciate your time and expertise. So thanks for sharing your insights with our listeners today.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.
I know our listeners are leaving with a more clear path, but of course, as you and I talked about, there's a lot more to implementing the right equity solution and preparing for that. And Polaris is here to support you. So if you'd like to schedule some time to learn more from Mark or dive into any of our Polaris expert advisory services, or maybe there's a topic we haven't covered that you want to hear about, you can send us an email to info@polarishealthcarepartners.com, or you can reach us by visiting our website at polarishealthcarepartners.com. Thanks so much for being a loyal listener and subscriber. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you on the next episode of the Group Practice Accelerator Podcast.